There's this persistent idea in Hollywood that beauty opens every door, that gorgeous actresses can write their own tickets and choose whatever roles they want. And sure, being conventionally attractive doesn't hurt. But Jessica Alba's career tells a different story, one that's way more complicated than the usual pretty girl gets famous narrative. By 19, Alba had a Golden Globe nomination. James Cameron personally selected her from over 1,000 candidates for his post-Titanic TV project. She landed major roles in 2 significant comic book franchises during the genre's early boom. And yet somehow, despite ticking every box that supposedly guarantees Hollywood success, her career never quite reached the heights everyone expected. She didn't become the next big thing. She became something else entirely. Alba started young, while taking acting classes at 11 and grinding through small parts in the background of TV shows and film. One early gig was Beverly Hills 90210, which she remembers for all the wrong reasons. Lesser-known actors were apparently forbidden from making eye contact with the main cast. Break that rule and you'd be kicked off set. For a kid trying to learn the craft, having to pretend the talented actors around you didn't exist felt absurd and demeaning. But she stuck with it. By the late 90s, she was landing more substantial roles, including the horror comedy Idle Hands alongside Devon Sawa and Seth Green. The film had a decent $25 million budget, but completely bombed, grossing just $4 million. Part of the problem was timing. The Columbine shooting happened right before release, and suddenly a violent movie full of dark humor felt inappropriate. But even without that tragedy, critics weren't impressed. The film just wasn't very good. Then came the breakthrough. James Cameron, fresh off Titanic's massive success, was looking for a television project. He'd initially considered doing a family drama, but went on what he later described as a manga reading spree and became obsessed with Alita, Battle Angel. This shifted his focus toward creating an action series with a female lead. Something in the vein of Agent 47, but with a woman at the center. Cameron had always been drawn to strong female characters. Sarah Connor, Ellen Ripley. This was his wheelhouse. He spent months searching for the right actress, seeing over 1,000 people. Alba wasn't the most technically skilled audition he saw, but Cameron himself admitted it wasn't her acting that initially stood out. But something about her kept pulling him back to her audition tape. Once she was cast, the writers shaped Dark Angel around her. The first season was a genuine hit. The press couldn't stop talking about her talent. At 19, she received that Golden Globe nomination. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Then the second season's ratings dropped by nearly 4 times. Some people point to another external event, this time September 11th. The show's vision of a dystopian America suddenly felt too heavy, amplifying an already somber national mood rather than providing escape. On top of that, the network changed the show's time slot, losing much of the teenage audience. Dark Angel was canceled after season 2. Doug Cameron was so devastated by the experience that he stayed away from television for 22 years. For Alba, it was time to transition into film. She started with The Sleeping Dictionary, which she now hates. Shooting in jungles with poisonous snakes, using bushes as bathrooms, and looking back at her own performance with what she describes as huge skepticism, calling herself about as good as a sock. It was also where her principle of not doing intimate scenes on camera became an issue. A body double was used instead. This boundary would follow her throughout her career, sometimes limiting the roles available to her. Next came Honey, a musical drama that reportedly was written for Aaliyah, who died in a plane crash before filming. Other rumors suggest Beyoncé was actually the first choice but couldn't make time. Either way, Alba got the part and spent months training in ballet, amazba, and hip-hop. The film did pretty well, grossing $62 million on an $18 million budget. There were sequels, though Alba wasn't involved, and none matched the original success. In 2003, she tried to break into Pirates of the Caribbean but lost the role to Keira Knightley. She showed interest in playing Elektra in Daredevil alongside Ben Affleck, but didn't get that either. However, she did land a part in another Frank Miller comic adaptation, Sin City. Director Robert Rodriguez was obsessed with translating the graphic novel directly to cinema. He was so committed to Miller's vision that the film doesn't even credit a screenwriter, just stating it's based on the graphic novel by Frank Miller. Rodriguez shot a quick intro scene with Josh Hartnett and showed it to Miller, essentially saying, "This is how it's going to look, let's go." That scene made it into the final film. Rodriguez was incredibly picky about casting. Mickey Rourke joined early. Michael Madsen reportedly walked up to Rodriguez at a Kill Bill party and asked why he hadn't been cast yet, so Rodriguez immediately gave him a role. At that same event, Rodriguez apparently partied hard enough with Quentin Tarantino that Tarantino agreed to direct one scene, the car ride with Clive Owen and Benicio del Toro. Jessica Simpson was apparently considered for the role of Nancy Callahan, but Rodriguez chose Alba. She was later surprised to learn she'd be playing a stripper. Once again, her principle of not undressing on camera came up. She managed to avoid showing more than she was comfortable with, which disappointed certain segments of the audience. Carla Gugino covered for those scenes instead. But the film was a massive success, gaining almost $160 million on a $40 million budget. Critics loved it. One of the world's first fully digital live-action movies, Sin City had a striking visual style and won numerous awards. That same year, Alba also starred in Fantastic Four. The development of that film had been dragging since the 80s, with various directors attached. At one point, Chris Columbus wanted Meg Ryan as Sue Storm and Dennis Quaid as Reed Richards. When Tim Story finally took over as director, Alba got the part. Columbus, still producing, pushed for a more comedic Batman TV series tone. But Story went for something closer to Sam Raimi's Spider-Man approach. The result was financially successful but critically panned. The film made $333 million on a $100 million budget, but reviews from critics and audiences were harsh. Too many silly jokes, poor acting, choppy storytelling. Alba took the most hits, getting her first Razzie nomination. And it wasn't just Fantastic Four. Another 2005 film, Into the Blue with Paul Walker, contributed to that nomination as well. Alba hates Into the Blue. According to her, when she signed on, her character wasn't a joke. But after endless rewrites, she became what Alba describes as a walking mannequin, demonstrating different bikinis. The swimsuits revealed so much that the studio feared an adult rating in cutscenes. In the trailer, they used digital effects to make the bikinis slightly more visible. Despite all these efforts, the film flopped, making only $46 million on a $50 million budget. Things could have gotten more interesting if Alba had agreed to star in Blood Rain that same year, directed by Uwe Boll. But she was repulsed by the violence and nudity. That film completely sank, but it was Kristanna Loken who absorbed the damage, not Alba. So at this point, Alba still had two commercially successful franchises, Fantastic Four and Sin City. She wasn't out of the game yet. Work on the Fantastic Four sequel began immediately. Alba recalls being persistently advised during shooting not to make ugly faces during emotional scenes, to cry with style, and that tears could be added with CGI later. Rise of the Silver Surfer received slightly better reviews than its predecessor. The first was called Royally Awful Trash, the second just Average Trash. But the first had been financially successful, so critics could be ignored. The second film barely made enough to justify its existence. It started amazingly, grossing a record-breaking $58 million in the US on opening weekend in 2007. But it quickly nosedived. In the end, it collected $300 million on a $130 million budget. Considering marketing expenses and theater cuts, the studio probably didn't profit much. Fox abandoned plans for a third movie and tried rebooting the series in 2015, which turned out even worse. As if that wasn't enough, Good Luck Chuck was released the same year. Alba stepped into a role originally meant for Jennifer Love Hewitt. Now, the movie's earnings were decent, but not enough to offset terrible reviews. Realizing she needed to win over critics, Alba started taking roles in low-budget films that weren't chasing box office numbers. Meet Bill and the 10 were among these projects, but even they got smacked by critics. There were still opportunities in Awake in the Eye, released in 2007 and 2008. But in Awake, Jessica starred alongside Hayden Christensen, another critic's target, and any attempts at serious acting were doomed from the start. Audiences didn't mind the film. Its $32 million box office on an $8 million budget confirms that. Critics, however, threw Razzie nominations at both Alba and Christensen. The Eye could have been Alba's chance to turn things around. Initially, Renee Zellweger was set to play the lead, but chose another horror movie instead. Jessica really wanted this role. She had violin lessons, learned basic Braille, and spent time with blind people to better immerse herself in the character. The movie did okay, making $58 million on $12 million. Audiences didn't mind it, but critics still weren't impressed and threw another Razzie nomination at her. Perhaps Alba could have avoided that 2008 Razzie nomination if not for The Love Guru. While critics had panned her previous films, decent box office had softened the blow. But The Love Guru failed everywhere. It had a fat budget of $62 million but managed to earn only $40 million. Mike Myers, who starred in and created the film, suffered the most. The Love Guru essentially buried his Hollywood career. Some believe that around this time, carefully choosing roles could have improved Jessica's trajectory. But that didn't happen. 2 years later, Alba returned with several films, including The Killer Inside Me, Valentine's Day, Little Fockers, and Robert Rodriguez's Machete and Spy Kids 4. Since Rodriguez enjoyed working with Alba in Sin City, most of these did fairly well at the box office. But it didn't help Jessica at all. She was nominated for another Razzie for all these films, and finally won it. Jessica was only 30 years old. Despite this parade of critical failures, she was still considered a sex symbol. She probably could have found ways to get back into major projects. But in 2011, Alba made a different choice. She distanced herself from acting and focused on creating The Honest Company, making safe and eco-friendly products for kids. Maybe she decided to play it safe. Maybe she followed her intuition. Publicly, she claims her inspiration came from caring for her daughter. The company expanded to include cosmetics, clothing, and more. Within a couple of years, it was valued at $1 billion, so now it was business and family first, acting second. In the last decade or so, the only notable films were the Sin City sequel and Mechanic Resurrection. Sin City had always been Jessica's ace, pretty much her only film that critics didn't destroy. But the sequel took forever. Frank Miller kept writing and endlessly rewriting, while Rodriguez told the press how mind-blowing the sequel would be. They even hired William Monahan, the screenwriter of The Departed. In 2012, filming for Sin City, A Dame to Kill for began. Rodriguez assembled a perfect cast and the visual style got even better thanks to a bigger budget. This time, the main femme fatale was Eva Green, selected from a lineup that included Angelina Jolie, Salma Hayek, Rachel Weisz, and Scarlett Johansson. Jessica returned as Nancy, who transformed from a sweet baby-faced stripper into a tough character wielding guns. This wasn't a new image for Alba and had been successful before. But some critics didn't like it, specifically criticizing Jessica's character transformation. A Dame to Kill 4 stayed true to the spirit of the first film. But something went wrong. The sequel bombed, pulling in $40 million with a $65 million budget, destroying Rodriguez's plans for a third part, where he'd planned to cast Johnny Depp. As for Mechanic Resurrection in 2016, it did reasonably well at the box office, mainly in China. But this success didn't improve Alba's acting career, and it seems that's not all that important anymore for Jessica. Currently, Alba rarely appears in movies at all and mainly focuses on her family and The Honest Company. According to her, she acts now simply because it's kind of fun. What fun she gets from projects like Killers Anonymous or the TV series LA's Finest is tough to say. But Jessica knows best. It appears these small gigs genuinely bring her joy. And maybe that's what really matters. Alba's story shows how Hollywood success is never guaranteed, even with all the right ingredients. Beauty, early acclaim, franchise opportunities, none of it was enough to overcome the combination of critical backlash, typecasting, and an industry with a notoriously narrow window for actresses. But it also shows there's more than one way to win. Sometimes the smartest move is knowing when to pivot, when to take what you've built in one arena and create something entirely new somewhere else. Thanks for watching. If you found this interesting, consider subscribing. There are plenty more stories like this one, careers that took unexpected turns, and I'd love to have you along for the next one.